Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. Today's review is going to be on the AI policy provided by AWS. So we're going to be looking at this AI policy that is placed on the website. Now, the reason why we're doing a series on the channel related to AI policies is because these are generally drafted by a AI counsel or a data protection counsel. And the reason being is because artificial intelligence and how it processes information generally will overlap with personal data. So there are provisions in this AI policy that are going to look at different components of data protection, and then the obligations that an organization like AWS has as it pertains to processing personal data. I can already see in this prohibition section that we can see some different personal data elements. We can see personal voice, likeness, okay, and without their consent. Now, the reason why we can see this prohibition here is because in certain geographies, voice recordings are considered sensitive data in some geographies. And depending on where this AWS responsible AI policy is being displayed, this organization needs to take into consideration what the obligations are when processing sensitive data. So in some geographies, the data protection law states, if you're processing sensitive data, you cannot do so without obtaining the consent of the individual. Now, when we talk about data protection, we look at something called legal bases, and it's basically a foundation on which organizations rely on to process personal data, and it's required under the law. So here we can see that AWS is saying that individuals may not use or facilitate or allow others to use artificial intelligence to depict a person's voice or likeness without their consent or other appropriate rights. Okay, so we can already see some different personal data elements that are coming up when it comes to prohibition. We can also see here that you can't use the AI to violate the privacy rights of others, including unlawful tracking, monitoring, and identification. Now, you might be asking, why is this prohibition going up on the AWS responsible AI policy? The reason is that the company needs to provide insight to users on how they can and cannot use the artificial intelligence, because AWS is trying to avoid any ramifications that indicate that they support any of these particular activities when it comes to the AI. They're basically giving the users insight into how to use the machine learning services, and this is not one of the use cases in which machine learning services can be used. Now, this is really important because when it comes to monitoring in some instances in some geographies is considered a high-risk processing activity, and it may be something that AWS doesn't want its users to participate in, which is why we're seeing this prohibition section. If you use the AI or machine learning services to make consequential decisions, you must evaluate the potential risks of your use case and implement appropriate human oversight. Now, this is really important. Now, some of the artificial intelligence legislation require that whenever utilizing AI, there's a term called human in the loop. And that human in the loop, basically, there's different iterations of human in the loop, but essentially AI should not be able to operate independently of human beings. So this information that AWS has placed on the website is basically looking at the artificial intelligence legislation and looking at what its obligations are as, I'm going to see above whether it's the provider of the artificial intelligence or machine learning services, which I presume that it is. Now, what's interesting about this responsible AI policy is that we do not see whether or not it is AWS that is offering the AI or machine learning services, meaning that they are the creator of the AI, or whether or not it is a service that they offer to their consumers, meaning they have procured an AI or machine learning service and they are offering it for use to the consumers. That would be really useful information. I presume they've left it a bit vague. We can see here, applies to your use of artificial intelligence and machine learning services, but it doesn't say owned by AWS. Features and functionalities including third-party models. So we do get some insight. It looks like it's a combination of AWS created AI and then third-party models that are offered to consumers. But I think it would be very interesting, and I would need to see the internal documentation with AWS to make that determination. And I wonder what value it would be to provide that insight to consumers, and I will tell you what I think. It is valuable to have that information because there are different obligations on organizations depending on how they are using AI and whether they procure it, whether they are updating it, whether they are configuring it, different AI legislation has different obligations, and that would be something that would be useful to know. Consequential decisions include those impacting a person's fundamental rights, health, or safety. Now, this is really important. Why am I going to highlight this? So this is really important because generally for these particular decisions, health and or safety, at a minimum, there's going to be some personal data that is processed. For the medical diagnosis, we already know there's definitely going to be PHI or health information. And for judicial proceedings, maybe there might be information related to criminal history. Both of these identify an individual, which is why these AI policies are really crucial from a transparency perspective and overlap with data protection. One of the things that a privacy counsel can assist with is drafting this AI policy, just because we've already identified different provisions here that overlap with how personal data influences an AI policy that is created. But then in addition to that, organizations need to understand how their AI can be used in full and what the ramifications are under the AI legislation and then data protection laws too. So it's not clear here which AI or machine learning services AWS is providing. What they are providing is requirements for consumers in responsibly using the AI. I think because they've put consequential decisions here means that their AI may actually create these consequential decisions. Otherwise, this information would not be here. If the AI in and of itself could not make a decision related to health and safety, I don't believe that this responsible AI requirements provision would be in this policy. So the first thing that I would do as a privacy counsel is find out exactly what the AI and machine learning services are. Review the different information that AWS is offering to its consumers, that it's listed here, and ensure that whatever their obligations are based on the geographies where they operate. Now, there's a lot of artificial intelligence legislation coming out of different geographies, whether it's on a national level or even on a state level. Here in the States, we do have some artificial intelligence legislation that's coming out as well. So companies are not just going to be responsible for looking at what a nation determines when it comes to utilizing artificial intelligence is. There's nuances in that they'll have to look at it from a state basis, and then also opinions that are coming out of different regulatory bodies, because those also influence how a company rolls out its artificial intelligence program. Now, what we do at the Data Privacy Lawyer is we actually create a privacy program. Now, because there's so much overlap with artificial intelligence, a lot of organizations are looking to get data protection legal advisory when it comes to rolling out artificial intelligence that processes personal data. Because we're looking at two different things, right? There's the AI component that will need a AI specialist and somebody that is going to be able to create the AI and configure it to the way that the organization anticipates. But there's also having a data process flow, which is something that we have for products and different services offered by organizations, which are no different to any other product offering, like a baby monitor or a voice recording app. Anything that touches on personal data is going to need the review of a privacy lawyer. So it's really important for organizations to get this right, because the repercussions from a state basis, industry basis, and a federal basis can be very severe. And I personally think that regulators are going to be looking out for organizations that do offer artificial intelligence to ensure that they're complying with the data protection laws as is required for the geographies where they offer their services. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you are looking to have an AI policy drafted by a privacy lawyer, take a look at my description below, and I would love to work with your organization.